So this video will show you how to change the brake pads on bikes that have V-brakes. So this bike has what's called V-brakes, and they're probably the most common style of brakes that you'll see on most bikes. They put them on a lot of low to mid-end mountain bikes, as well as hybrid bikes like this one. The way that they work is that the brake arms are fixed to the frame here at the bottom, and there's a cable which runs across the top. And when you pull on that cable using the brake lever, it pulls the two brake arms together and applies pressure to these rubber pads here, which push up against the inside of the rims. Every time that you apply your brakes when you're riding your bike, that causes friction to be created between your brake pad and the rim of your wheel. And over time, that friction causes the brake pads to wear down. It's a good idea to inspect your brake pads every few hundred kilometers. Or if you're finding that your brakes are becoming less effective, it's a good idea to check them and see how much they've worn down. I actually already have a video on YouTube showing how to tune up and correctly adjust your V-brakes. So I recommend checking that out first before you resort to replacing your brake pads. So the best way to take a look at your brake pads so that you can properly inspect them and see how much wear you have left on your pads is to disengage the brakes. And that's quite easy to do on a bike with V-brakes. If you have one of these rubber boots, the first thing you got to do is pull that out of your way so it exposes this aluminum piece right here. Then you take one of your hands and you use it to squeeze the two arms of the brake levers together, like so. And using your other hand, what you have to do is you have to guide this aluminum piece by holding onto here so that it can slide back out this way, and then it'll pull up, the cable will pull up through that slot there. So hopefully you can see better from that angle. So when I push these together, you've got to just guide this aluminum piece right here so that it comes out and your cable slides through this little slot which is there at the top. Just like so, and then you can release it, and then your brakes are disengaged. Now with the brakes disengaged, you can get a much better view of the inside of your brake pads there. So this right here is a new brake pad. This is one that I'm going to use to replace the brake pads on this bike. And as you can see from the side view there, it has all of these little slots along the rubber surface there, and those are there, to help to create more friction for helping to stop the bike. But you can also use those to kind of judge how much wear there is over time. When this brake pad gets used and it's being, all that friction is being applied to it, the top surface there is going to get basically sanded down. And eventually you're not going to see any of those little slots in it anymore. And when you get to that point, it'll be an indication that it's pretty much time to replace the brake pads on your bike. So as you can see from the brake pads on this bike, they're quite a bit more smooth than the brand new brake pads that I was showing. And it's pretty much time. As you can see, there's really not much material left on there. And eventually, it's going to wear right through to the metal which is underneath the rubber there, and that's obviously not going to be good for my rim, but also the brakes do become quite a bit less effective as that rubber becomes thinner and thinner, so I should probably change these brake pads very soon. So here are some examples of brake pads which are worn down and have been needed to be replaced. As you can see, this one here, it's kind of been unevenly worn. You can see there's a bit of a lip here. Basically this side of the brake pad hasn't worn quite as quickly as the other side there. So it's just, this side is a lot higher than that side there, and that's basically caused from not having your brake pad correctly positioned, so that when it's braking, it's not, the whole brake pad isn't making contact with the rim. And this brake pad here, you can see that there's actually metal which is exposed there. That's how these things are made up. There's basically a metal bar which runs the length of your brake pad there. And after you've worn through all of the rubber up there, the metal will be exposed, and you really don't want to ride your bike or use your brakes when they look like this, because basically when you stop, you're putting metal on metal contact. The metal of your brake pad is touching up against the metal of your rim, and that's going to ruin your rim very quickly. So I'm actually going to demonstrate how to do this task using the back brakes of my bike, but it really doesn't matter. The back and the front are pretty much identical, so I'm just going to start by disengaging the brakes using the method that I already showed. So now that we got the brakes here disengaged, we're going to start by taking off the old brake pads. And one of the good things about doing this job is it doesn't need really any fancy tools. All it needs is just one Allen key to take this nut here off. And for this bike, it uses a 5mm one. I think that's a pretty common size for that bolt. So what you're going to do is hold on with one hand onto the brake pad, and then you use your Allen key to rotate counterclockwise as a right-handed thread. So we want to take it off. My thumb points to where it wants to go with my right hand. My fingers show which way to rotate, the right-hand rule. So we're going to just rotate counterclockwise to loosen it off, and as you can see, the brake pad or the brake arm will stick out further once it's disengaged. And then what you can do is you just hold onto that nut there at the end, or actually hold onto the brake pad and then unscrew the nut with your fingers. And there's a bunch of hardware that'll come out after the nut. So you can see there's I guess 3 pieces of hardware which are right there, and then if I lift it up, there's 2 more pieces of hardware which are on there, and I'll explain what those are in a moment. So there you can see what I just took off of the bike, and that's what it looks like with the brake pad removed. So basically that nut is holding the brake pad, it's clamping it on to your brake arm here, and then when you're pushing your brakes, it's pushing that pad up against the rim to help slow you down. So with your new brake pad, you should find 6 pieces of hardware which are attached to the bolt part of it here. So the first one's pretty self-explanatory. It's this nut here, which goes on the end, and it's got a hex slot there at the end, which should take an Allen key, usually a 5mm Allen key. So that's what goes on there and holds everything together. After that, you've got a small washer that looks like that. After that, you're going to have one of these spacer pieces, which has one flat side and one concave side. And then after that, you're going to have 2 pieces of hardware which are the same. And again, they're going to have one flat side, but the other side is a convex surface. And the idea with having these is that you put them together so that the concave and the convex surface go together, and then it's able to pivot so that you can have your brake pad positioned at different angles relative to your brake arm. So after you take off the second convex spacer, you've got another concave one, and usually they have it set up so you've got one big concave spacer and one small concave spacer. And the idea is you can alternate between which one goes on the inside and which one goes on the outside, depending on how much space you need. So I've got here a brake arm from a V-brake, which I'm just going to use for demonstration to show how to put this together. Obviously, you normally would do this with the brake lever on the bike, but I thought I would do it on this one that I just had lying around, just so you could see a little bit better. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start by putting 2 pieces of hardware on here. You're going to want to put one of the 2 concave spacers on there. More commonly, I think you want to use the thicker one, but you might have to trial and error and see which one is going to fit better. So I'll put the larger concave spacer on there first, and then I put one of the convex spacers on after it. And you want to put them so that the 2 surfaces, the concave and the convex, are facing each other, so that they lock together like that, and they're going to give us the ability to pivot in different directions, so we'll get that brake pad positioned correctly. So after you've got those 2 pieces of hardware on there, the next thing you're going to want to do is insert the bolt through the hole in the brake arm there, like that. And then on the other side there, opposite the first convex spacer that I have on there, you're going to want to put the other convex spacer on there with the flat side going up against the brake arm. And then the other concave spacer goes on after it. So it goes like that, and then your small little washer goes on after that, like so, and then the nut goes on there at the end to hold it all together. So now with it together, you can kind of see what I mean about it being able to pivot. So when I tighten this down, it's going to stay at whatever angle I happen to have it at. So if I want to have the brake, facing like this, so that it's not totally parallel with the brake arm, I could tighten it up like that, and it would still work because of the way that those spacers work with being able to pivot. However, if I wanted it to be straight, I could also do that with it like that. With having this slot here, it also allows me to have the mobility to move this up and down. So they make it so that your brake pad has all this mobility, so you can get it positioned, perfectly, so that it's pressing up against your rim properly, so it's making, really good contact with your rim. So it's going to give you lots of stopping power, and also so that you're not going to be wearing your brake pad unevenly like this one was. So I'm going to start putting this one here on the bike, and as I said, you want to start with one of the two concave spacers. And really, knowing which one to use just kind of depends on how much space there is in there. In some cases, there won't be a whole lot of space in there, and you'll want to use your more narrow one. But in other cases, in most cases, I find that the thicker one is really what is more useful to have on there first. But probably the best way to go is to take a look at how it was, before you took off the old one, and just, put the new brake pad on the way that the old brake pad was on there anyways. So I'm going to start off with the thick concave spacer there, then one of the convex ones, and then it goes on like so, and then on the back I put the other convex spacer on, and using my thumb to hold it so it doesn't fall off, and then the other concave, the washer, and then the nut to hold it all together, and basically just get it so that it's tightened, so it's not, so it's nice and loose on there. You don't want to tighten it up yet. If you tighten it up like this, you'll find that the brake pad is hitting your frame there, and you're not going to be able to get it around. So just keep it loose until you've got it past that point, and then you can rotate like this, and then you want to position it correctly before you tighten this up here with your Allen key. So as I already explained, it's really important to have your brake pads so that they're adjusted correctly, so that they're making proper contact with the rim of your bike when you're applying your brakes. And I'm going to kind of demonstrate that using this shoe here, which represents your brake pad, and the shoe box here, and where this surface here represents the rim of your bike. And basically what you're aiming to get is so that when these two surfaces, right before they come together, they should be perfectly parallel, so that when I'm pushing up against each other, the whole, basically all of the contact area on this shoe is making, full contact with the rim right away. You don't want to have it, so it's coming in on an angle. This is obviously exaggerated, but you wouldn't want it to be coming in on an angle like this, where, only the first little bit there, and, when I squeeze it harder, then a little bit more will come. You don't want that. You basically want it so that it's all of a sudden all coming together at once, so you don't have to put a whole lot of effort into stopping and pulling on your brake lever. Looking at it from this angle here, you want it the same. You want it coming in perfectly parallel, so this surface is perfectly parallel to that one, so it's making full contact. You don't want it so it's coming in like this, and only, making contact with that little strip of the shoe there. From this angle, you also want to make sure that you have your brake pad so that it's properly centered on the rim. You don't want it, off overhanging like this, so that only half of the brake pad, or only a fraction of the brake pad is making contact with your rim, because it is going to cause that uneven wear that I was showing before, and it's also not going to be a very effective stop because there's a lot less surface area there which is making contact, and it's going to have less friction, and it's going to slow you down not as effectively as when it's perfectly centered like that. The other reason you don't want to have this overhanging is because on one of the two sides of your rim you're going to have the tire there, and you really don't want to have your brake pad rubbing against the tire every time that you stop, because then you've got rubber on rubber contact with the brake pad rubbing up against the tire, and eventually obviously you're going to wear through your tire, and then you're going to have to get a new tire. So getting the brake pad so that it's positioned correctly is a little bit of trial and error. You're going to want to probably tighten it up in a few different positions and just inspect it. As I was saying, you want to make sure and check and make sure that the angle is positioned correctly. But the best way to get it tightened up, I find it, is to, you put one hand so it's on the brake arm like this, and you're pushing it in, and then you use your other hand just to kind of guide the brake pad so that it's in the proper spot, like so. And then by using your finger and your thumb on here, and you're pushing up against the brake arm, what it does is it basically pinches the brake pad so that it's in between the brake arm here and the rim, and that's going to allow you to take your other hand off and be able to tighten up this bolt here and get it in the right spot. So I'm going to try it in this spot here, and we'll see how it looks. As you can notice, as I'm turning this, what happens is the brake pad itself is going to rotate a little bit with the bolt, because there's a little bit of friction in there. It's causing the brake pad, or the bolt actually itself, to rotate and cause the brake to rotate. So after it does that, it'll become a little bit off center, off of how you had it. So after you've done that, you can use your other hand and you can just kind of rotate it back a little bit, just basically get it to where it's supposed to be, and then you can just tighten it up a little bit again. So after you got it tightened up, you can kind of just take a look at it and see what sort of angle it's making. Is it making contact in the middle there? Just basically inspecting it and see how you like it. As I said, it may be trial and error. You might have to do this a few times to get it where you want it. But I'm pretty happy with how that one's sitting right there. So I'm going to do the other side. So the other side's exactly the same. So I'm just going to do this in high speed mode, starting by taking off the old brake pad. So now that I've got both new brake pads installed, I'm ready to re-engage the brakes. So I just do that by using my hand here to push both brake arms together, and then using my other hand here, all I have to do is just guide this aluminum piece right here into the slot here on the other brake arm. So I'll just do that like so. And once it's through, you can just let go, and the brakes are re-engaged, and we're all finished. Now, however, doing that last step there, you may have found that you weren't really able to re-engage the brakes because this cable here was too tight. Basically, you weren't able to get the brake arms close enough together to be able to fit this piece through that piece. In that case, there's two ways to correct it. Either you can readjust your cable tension here. So basically loosening off this bolt here will allow the cable to be pulled further through there, and then retightening it up again after you're finished, obviously. And the other option is something that I was discussing earlier with the spacers. As in this case, we used the large spacer here on the inside of the brake pad. However, if you're finding that there's not enough cable section there, you could put the smaller spacer on the inside there, which would thus bring your brake pad so that they would be, or your brake arms so they would be closer together, and it would make it possible to be able to re-engage the brakes properly without adjusting your cable tension. So anyway, that concludes my tutorial on how to change the brake pads on a bike that has V-brakes. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. And also, if you do have a bike that has V-brakes, I would recommend checking out my video on how to tune up your V-brakes. I have a link to that in the description below. But anyway, thanks for watching.